Hello and welcome everyone. I hope you can hear me well. Please say so in the chat. We're going to start shortly. Let's see. See some friends here. Lyndon, how you doing, Lyndon? Hi from Puerto Rico. Okay. Serafim, let me know if you can hear me. Can you hear me? Sound is good. Yeah, okay, good. All right, so we're going to have a nice session today. I did not bring myself a glass of water. Okay, hopefully I won't need it. Good, so give it another minute and we will start. All right, off we go. Oh, no. Sorry, not off we go. Off we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting session of Kabbalah Explained Simply. And today I am very thrilled to talk about a topic that is of interest to a lot of people. I can say about myself, having grown up in Israel, Jewish, there's no question that Jesus was a household name. Everybody knew about him. He was one of the biggest religious celebrities, if you will, if there was ever such a thing. And that name is everywhere. It's in popular culture. It's in movies and stories. I think I probably heard that name when I was in my early teens, and it stuck. It represents hope, forgiveness, redemption, but it does not appear in Kabbalah. So, was Jesus a Kabbalist? That's a question that we will try to answer today. I know it's an interesting topic. It brings up probably a lot of emotions. So we'll look at it from our point of view together. And if you have any questions, obviously we'll try to answer them. I will put a few caveats though, so bear with me. So we get a lot of these questions all the time. I have to say, every time I am teaching a young group, every time I'm doing a session, even I think before we just had a retreat, a couple of weeks ago, and we did a preparation for the retreat. And in the preparation, we had a question about Jesus. And those are not unusual questions. They keep coming up. Can you tell us about Jesus? Was he, if he was a Jew, does he mean he studied Kabbalah? Didn't Jesus also teach about love and other principles that appear in Kabbalah? Why isn't he mentioned in Kabbalistic text? Was he a Kabbalist? Can you study Kabbalah and still believe in Jesus, or still have a relationship with Jesus and everything that comes with it? So we're getting all those questions, and they're all natural because a lot of our students come from all kinds of circles. We have students that have been raised Christian, Muslim, various indigenous traditions. We have people from all over the world, and this question was so burning for people. I remember we have people that bring up this question even halfway through what we call the young group, where you're already after the fundamentals. You've gone through the KabU basics, you've done the Q&A sessions, you understand the basic principles, you're joining the grad environment, you're already starting to work in a group, in a Kabbalistic group, working on all those principles of inner work, and halfway through the semester, someone will ask, where is Jesus in all of this? Why isn't he there? Why isn't his teachings there? So that's why we decided to address this here in this special session. So hopefully, down the line, when you end up in young group somewhere along the way, along on your spiritual path, you will remember this session, and it will serve you somehow on this path, I hope. So the story of Jesus, it's an interesting story. It can be a very emotional story for some people. I know firsthand from having many conversations with people who study Kabbalah but have grown up in a Christian household. We have friends who have been ministers Christian ministers. We have friends that are still working with their churches and study Kabbalah. How do those things go together? So we understand this is a very, it could be an emotional topic, could be a very intimate topic for some people. For others, it could be nothing. It could be like, oh no, Jesus, this is Kabbalah, moving along. But clearly, his story is somehow intertwined with the history of the wisdom of Kabbalah and the Jewish tradition, then the Christian tradition, even the Muslim tradition. So where does he fit in all of this? So we want to kind of look back at this time a little bit, right? This was a time of great turmoil among the Jews, a lot of confusion, a lot of speculation, people studying different things, a lot of people teaching different things. A lot of people came up during those times as teachers, as healers, offering to heal the rift that was tearing the Jewish nation apart. And there's no question that whoever that figure was historically, he ended up sowing the seeds for one of the three big monotheistic religions. He was persecuted by the Romans. He was executed by the Romans. He had a lot of a great rift between him and the Jewish Wisdom Council at the time. All those things are happening, but I want to draw your attention to a few other things, a few other interesting facts. During that time, a little bit before the time of Jesus, but also throughout, there were other sages that were working, and we'll get into them in a minute. Rabbi Akiva, for example, was also a Jewish sage. He is credited with focusing all the wisdom on the one rule of love your friend as yourself. It's at the heart of the wisdom. It's the gold standard of Kabbalah, of spiritual attainment. It's this love. He was there teaching it, and he was also captured, tortured, martyred by the Romans. And if you do some research online, you'll see a lot of stories that conflate the figure of Jesus with the figure of Rabbi Akiva, some arguing they're even the same person. But it doesn't end there. If you continue to look, you also find the story of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. I'm hiding. Let me just scooch out of the way for an interesting tidbit here. So Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was another Jewish sage. He was the student of Rabbi Akiva. He was the author of the book of Zohar. He was also persecuted by the Romans, spent time in a cave with 9 other Kabbalists, and they wrote the book of Zohar. And that book is also rife with mysticism and misconceptions. And if you see, you can even see that the last letter of the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, you have I-N-R-I, by INRI, which is the Latin Jesus Nazaratus Rex Iodorum, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, which was inscribed above the cross. So, sorry, let me just turn this off. So it's a very interesting thing that these figures were sort of intertwined together. So what is the historical point of view? I don't know. I'm not a historian. I love history. But if you want to approach this from a historic point of view, if you want to approach it from an academic point of view, you're welcome to do so. You can go to the library, you can go on Google, you can probably get a degree on the history of that period. Instead, we want to look at this question from a different point of view, from the point of view of its relevance to our desire for spirituality. We are Kabbalists. We are very practical people. We are concerned with one thing. We have a goal, a spiritual goal, and we're asking, how can I get to this goal? How can I take another step towards this goal every day? So that's the sort of the angle that we're going to take today. But we're also going to touch on history. We're going to touch on kind of the what was happening in the background of all of this, and gradually we'll also come to answer that question. I promise there will be an answer, a definitive answer from the point of view of Kabbalah. So bear with me, and of course, if you have questions, send them. I already have a link to a Google Doc. We will have some time for questions. Of course, friends who are members of GE, you will have a chance to ask more questions in the Zoom session that will take place after the Kabbalah Explained session. So let's dive in. So what happened about 2,000 years ago? In order to understand that and to understand where all these figures came from, we have to take a step back and look at the broader arc of the history of Kabbalah and indeed the history of our ego. In Kabbalah, we teach that the thing that was created was a desire to receive pleasure. The Creator is a desire to bestow pleasure. He's all good. There's none else besides Him. He only wants to bestow all the good and abundance to someone or something. So what did He do? He created a desire to receive, a vessel, something that can receive it, all that good that He had to give. That's the beginning of everything. You sometimes see us drawing these three axes: the starting stage of the Creator creating that desire and that desire existing in potential, the development, the evolution of that into our world through the 4 phases of direct light, then the evolution throughout our world, and eventually the spiritual ascent back to a relationship with the Creator through equivalence of form, but consciously. You probably have seen this graph before. We want to focus on one aspect of this graph, which is this world. So in this world, you can see that our ego is developing over time. So we have the desire, which we call the ego sometimes, the desire to receive in order to receive. That's the human ego. And as that ego develops, it grows as we move throughout history. So roughly 5,780 years ago, give or take, we are told of the first person to have discovered that there is a spiritual world. There is a Creator with whom he can be in contact through equivalence of form. This was Adam. We call him Adam HaRishon sometimes. There's also a spiritual system called Adam HaRishon, but this is Adam. He was a real person, not the Adam and Eve from the story in the Bible, which has a whole other symbolic meaning. But Adam, he was a person who lived on this earth almost 6,000 years ago, and he suddenly had this realization that there is something more than just living life like an animal. There's got to be something. He started to ask those questions. He had a very small ego, very small desire, very pure, as we say, very refined. And because of that, he was able to very quickly make this contact with the inner layers of nature. He started to have these insights about his place in the system of creation. he wrote a book, he left a book for us, and he also had a group, but we don't speak much of those days. They're really, really far away from us and from our current ego, current will to receive. So we kind of leave it on the side. We move on from Adam 20 generations later, and we go to Abraham in Babylon. Typically, when we speak about the wisdom of Kabbalah, we speak about the method for building a Kabbalistic group, for revealing the Creator in the connection between people. That started in the time of Abraham. He also lived his life in Babylon. He was a priest. He discovered all these natural principles that govern everything. And when there was an eruption of the will to receive, of the ego, between all those clans that lived in Babylon, a very fertile, very prosperous land at the time, that eruption of the ego suddenly brought this great deal of friction and animosity to these people who lived, about 3 million people who lived at the time in Mesopotamia. And they didn't know what to do with it. Suddenly, from a feeling of almost like one big family, different clans that belonged to one giant city-state, suddenly they felt as if they're not safe, as if everyone is out to exploit them. Suddenly, I felt like I could derive more pleasure by exploiting the other rather than working with them. Suddenly, I wanted more. I started to compare myself to others more radically. It started to dominate the way I was thinking. Food, sex, and family were not enough. We wanted more. There was money, there was honor to be had, power. All those desires suddenly took over, almost in stark contrast to the loving relationship that existed before, the harmonious relationship that existed before, at the very least. This was the time of Abraham, Babylon. That was another leap in the ego, still small, tiny, minuscule in comparison, but it was there nevertheless. That was that's where this point in the heart awakened in Abraham, and he assembled other people around him, and he said, if you feel like this growing evil inclination, exploitative tendency in you, if you feel that there's something above that, if you want to learn how to work with it, I'll teach you. That was the method of Abraham. He opened his tent, he called people over, he taught them. It went against the philosophy of the ruling king, and he eventually had him expelled. Abraham was expelled from Babylon, and we tell the story of this group that followed him, and you can read about it in the Bible. That group followed Abraham into the land of Canaan, and from there they continued to work on their connection, on that method of revealing the Creator, the force of love and bestowal above the growing ego. That's what Abraham was teaching. And they ended up going down into Egypt. That's a story, the biblical story everybody knows most likely and remembers. They're going into Egypt, and Egypt is, in Kabbalah, is not necessarily the geographical location of Egypt. It's the symbol of the will to receive. It's the lowest degree of the desire to receive in order to receive, with Pharaoh being sort of the king of the will to receive, if you will. So all these stories that we read about in the Bible, they're all allegories for these changes in the relationships between people. It's the forces that govern the way we relate to one another. And so these people went down to Egypt, you could say, you can imagine, okay, a few thousand people with their camels and their flocks and everything, and the women and children, making their way down to Egypt. And you can also imagine this group that from a state of being able to work with the will to receive, which was not that great, suddenly that will to receive is growing, it's getting heavier and heavier, and they have to work with it. Why? Because in order to reveal the Creator, you need to have a desire as big as what the Creator wants to give you. So you cannot remain with a tiny point in the heart. You have to develop that desire, grow it over time. And that's what the story of Egypt is all about. It's the growing of the desire. Okay? So it's not the physical travel of a group to Egypt. It's the growing of the desire. Suddenly, what was enough is not enough. Suddenly, if I was able to get along with everyone around me on this level of the will to receive, suddenly that level is growing. There's suddenly more desire, more resistance to connect, to implement these ideas of love above everything. So that's what's happening in Egypt. So you see, we're talking about stages in the development of the desire over time, not necessarily historic periods. And that's why in Kabbalah you won't see a lot of mention of exact dates. You can find some, but Kabbalists don't talk about dates. They're talking about changing states. So from Egypt, people of Israel were able to extract themselves, leave Egypt with all the vessels. There's a great line about it in the story, that they borrow all the vessels from the Egyptians and they leave Egypt and they follow Moses into the Sinai desert. They received the Torah. The Torah was the instruction for how to relate to one another, how they need to arrange their spiritual lives together. Torah from the word Horah, instruction in Hebrew. So the whole point of them going to Egypt, then coming out, and then going to the land of Israel is about revealing a greater desire, and they're learning how to work with it in order to bestow in a way that will make them equivalent with the Creator. That's the whole wisdom. Everything else are just details of that wisdom. So they go to Mount Sinai, they receive the Torah, and from there they go to the land of Israel. Again, land, Eretz, from the word Ratzon, and Israel from the word Yashar El, straight to the Creator. Yashar El, straight to the Creator. That was the characteristic of that group that came out of Egypt. We have great desire and we want to aim it at the Creator. We want to reach that quality of love and bestowal, which is what the Creator is about. So the development of the desire is happening here, is presented to us through these stories, but it's happening in each and every one of us. If you're discovering the wisdom of Kabbalah, you're at first like Adam or Abraham, you have this point in the heart, and it starts to assemble the desire in you, those desires in you that are interested in discovering more about this wisdom, that seek to connect with a higher quality, something above the level of this world. And you find a group, just like you're here. And with this group, you work in the group, your desire grows. You go into Egypt, you go into working for the sake of the will to receive until you're able to make your way out of Egypt. There's a whole story about that as well. We're not going to get into it. And you make your way through the desert to the land of Israel. That's the desire. That's the place where you can really reach the highest degree of connection between you and the greatest degree of revelation of the Creator. And indeed, in the land of Israel, in that state called the land of Israel, where all my desires are aimed towards the Creator, and I'm able to now work with those desires, take desires from those desires and correct them in order to bestow, to be close to the Creator, the representation of that degree of connection between a group of people is called Beit HaMikdash. That was the first temple that was built. Beit in Hebrew, a house, a home, a house is another way to talk about it. Desire. Every time you hear about a land, a house, a chair, a place, it's all a desire, because there's nothing other than desire, really. So it's a desire, and Mikdash, holy, means sanctified, means separate. So it's a desire that's separated from the other desires, from the desire to receive. This is a desire that's corrected in order to bestow. So Bait is Malchut and bestowal is bina. That's the degree of bestowal. So with our growing ego, but with the screen on it, the intention to bestow, we reach the highest level of correction. This is the first temple. This is the level of chaya here. Again, I'm not going to explain everything. I'm just trying to paint a general picture. But this is the highest degree of connection that we were able to reach as a people about 3,000 years ago. It's a degree of connection and adhesion to the Creator, not the stones and the woods and the gold trimmings that we envision when we close our eyes and we think about a temple. But as soon as that temple was built, it immediately started to get corrupted. Why? Because that was the general plan. We were not supposed to keep that connection for ourselves. There was a bigger plan here. What was the plan? So after the first temple, the people of Israel started to deteriorate, lose their connection. There were other desires pulling them apart. And there's a lot of stories about it. And at the end of that deterioration, the temple is destroyed. This is the symbol of that connection that's being destroyed. And the people of Israel are exiled. They're exiled for 7 years. They come back from Babylon and they build the second temple. That temple, as well as the first, as soon as it was built, it started to deteriorate. As soon as people reach that degree of connection between them, immediately it starts to break, and the fighting and the friction and the exploitation, a lot of the stuff that incidentally is mentioned in connection with Jesus and the time that he lived in and preached. So that's the time that we live in. And after the destruction of the second temple, Jerusalem is destroyed. Civil war sees a third of its inhabitants killed by their own brothers, and the nation is going into exile that lasts 2,000 years. That's the kind of the situation where we're here. So from the highest degree that we were in, where is that over there? Wait, yes. So from the highest degree of connection, we fall back to the will to receive in order to receive. All that's left is a memory, a record of the time that we were connected and the method that we used to connect. And then the people of Israel are sent into exile. This is a very telling, because this time, as you can see, corresponds with, again, with the development of the desire. This is not a historical evolution, although it takes place on a historical axis of time. I think it says here, yeah, T, it's time. So although it takes place on the axis of time, this is in fact a representation of the forces working in us and around us to bring us to correction. First is the correction of Israel. We call it Galgalta Ve'enayim. You don't have to remember that term. Then we have the shattering of the vessels. This corresponds to the shattering that took place in the spiritual world before we even got to the corporeal reality that we speak of. And then we have the intermingling of the desires of Israel with the nations of the world. Those who had the desire to go straight to the Creator, to reveal Him in connection between them, and those who don't have that desire yet, who are not ready, whose desire is not developed yet, but in whom the Creator wants to be revealed. And then finally, we're moving towards, so I was here, the exile, and now we're finally moving, this is today, today, we're moving towards the correction of the entire world. So this is the reason why we went into exile, okay? Why this whole thing is happening, why we fell from that degree of connection, the people who were teaching there fell from their degree, all the great traditions, everything seemingly shattered. That's the time that we live in when we think about the life of Jesus and his contemporaries. So zooming in, I just want to zoom in into these, into this area between the temples, right between and after the temple. So the time that leading up to the first temple is the time of Moses. That's the Bible that collects all those, all the instructions for the work with the will to receive, presented in the language of the Bible that seems to be talking about places and people and miracles and all those things, but it's really changes in the will to receive and the relationship between the desires. Moses was the person that wrote the Bible, but Moses is a quality in our will to receive. Moshe, from the word to pull out, similar to Mashiach, right? It's the pulling quality, that it's the point in the heart that pulls those desires that are ready to leave the domain of the will to receive in order to receive and to acquire a new intention, to come closer to the Creator. That's why the story of gathering around the mountain, climbing up the mountain, it's all those, this is all these metaphors for that. That's the time of the Bible. Following that is the time of the oral Torah and the Mishnah. That's the time leading to the second temple. So after the Bible, all the other laws were passed down as oral Torah, as these spoken principles from teacher to student, teacher to student. And indeed, the sages that were leading the nation of Israel at the time were Hillel and Shammai, two huge Kabbalists who lived at the time, and after them Ben Zakkai, and who worked on the writing of the Mishnah, which is the collection of all these oral laws. During this time, think about it, you have an entire nation that is in some form of attainment, spiritual attainment. First degree of Chaya here, then degree of Neshama here. But those are spiritual attainments. This is not just some people living some sort of a ritualistic existence. We're talking about a group of people in spiritual attainment. Everybody's in it. Everybody's steeped in these laws, in these principles of love. And in fact, if you look back at historic text, I should have brought it here, because there's a great account of the time of that first temple where the nations of the world looked up and saw people flock into the temple 3 times a year. When they came to Jerusalem, no one was ever short of anything. There was, if you needed a bed, you got a bed, you got a room, you had an oven where you can bake your offerings and all of that. It was like one big Woodstock festival. I have actually, Seth Brightman and I have a podcast. It's called the Jew Function Podcast. You can find it online, and there's an episode about that period of time. So I encourage you to check it out. But it's the descriptions, the actual descriptions by historians of the time were just phenomenal. Just brotherly love everywhere. We can't even imagine those things today. This is that time. And then when we think of the next level after that, it's the appearance of Rabbi Akiva, as I mentioned, and then Rashbi and the writing of the Zohar, which was concealed for our time. Now, the tradition continues. Teacher to student, teacher to student, teacher to student. But this is the time that we exist in. This is the time when we think of Jesus, the rise of Christianity. It's that period of time. So the destruction of the temples, a deterioration of an entire nation from that connection, the exile of that nation, the separation, this is the climate that existed at the times. So why was the temple ruined? You may be asking yourself, why? So beyond the fact that it had to be ruined, because the nation of Israel that was really made of representatives from all other nations, all future nations. There is no Jewish nation. It's a group of people who followed Abraham, representatives from all these other nations that lived in Babylon. So they were simply the ones who went to study medicine, and were supposed to go back, a few thousand years later and cure everyone from the disease of the ego, of the will to receive. They just forgot about it a little bit, but that's a different story. But why? So that's why that's the big picture of why the temple was ruined. But why was it? What actually brought it down? So we talked about different things here. The thing you may hear in the wisdom of Kabbalah is the fall from lishma to lo lishma. Each one of those things here that you see on the screen can be a Kabbalah Explained Simply lesson. But some of those things are so important that we're going to spend at least a couple of minutes on each. So lo lishma and lishma. The highest degree of spiritual work is called lishma. It's when you work without any shred of reward into the will to receive. Sounds counterintuitive. I'm here to receive pleasure. I want spiritual attainment. Yes, but it happens in a new set of vessels. It's not happening in the current vessels. Your current vessels, your uncorrected vessels, are egoistic vessels. Whenever you receive in those vessels, you break away from the Creator. You forget about Him. When you are filled with some pleasure, you forget about the Creator. Heck, we barely remember the person who brought us the pleasure, okay, let alone the Creator who's behind everything. So the spiritual work, the spiritual attainment of an entire nation was when everyone was only thinking of being in this loving relationship to one another, not because it feels nice, but because they wanted to return the favor, so to speak, to the Creator. They wanted to, just like the Creator doesn't think of Himself in order to be in equivalence of form with that quality, I also don't think of myself. What's coming to me, what's in it for me, where's my little reward? That's a tough state to be in. And we're not even going to get into how to be there, just to note that the people fell from that degree of lishma to lo lishma. And even below that. Lo lishma means I'll do everything. I have to love the others. Great. I have to be nice. Sure. Help each other. Do something. Absolutely. But as long as I'm also taken care of, right? As long as a little something for me here. That's lishma. And you can't do anything about it. It's not within your power to change it. It's a quality of the will to receive. You need the upper light for it. There's a whole method for it. But that little change, that little drop in frequency, if you will, from lishma to lo lishma already separated people from spirituality. The other thing is, people said, well, tell me what to do. Oh, I gotta bring someone food. Great. I gotta keep in mind, this is before all the corporeal traditions we associate with Jewish religion and then other religions existed, right? People existed in this field of love. They learned from that. These corporeal commandments, mitzvot, they came later. After the destruction, they were sort of a first aid kit, or rather some sort of a, I'm not sure what to call it, but some sort of a first aid kit to help stay together and alive throughout the exile. But everyone was doing all those things with that intention, Yashar El. When you fall from that level, you start to just do things without the intention. Because intention, it's difficult, and no one can see it, and it's hard to measure. And how do I know that I'm even doing the right thing? But if I have to get up and pray 3 times a day, sure, that I see that. I see people going somewhere, doing something. I have to bring an offering. I have to do this and that. These are measurable things, tangible things. This is, again, another way for the will to receive to sneak in there. And as we said, without the intention, we're falling into corporeal actions. So instead of existing in a field of love, existing in the relationship between us, in the connection, in that field of connection between us, maybe this I can draw. Hold on. Bear with me. Boom. There you go. So instead of, so here we are. You've probably seen that drawing before. Here are the people. Imagine hundreds of thousands of people, a few millions actually living. And now, we used to have these connections between us of love, bestowal. I care about you. The law of arvut, mutual guarantee. You heard those words before, some of you. That's what's important to me, nothing else. I don't want to receive anything from myself, just as long as we can maintain these connections. Why? for the sake of the Creator. So the Creator, the upper force, that light, this will be revealed here. That's the field that was being revealed here. But what happened? We gradually broke off these connections. So now we don't feel that. We can't live in that field anymore. In fact, I can just take, where is that? This. No more, no more, no more. The connections are still there. It's actually misleading. It's actually misleading. I'm misleading you. So the connections are still there. This is actually a better representation. But they're broken. They're broken. I don't value them. They're not important to me anymore. What's important is my little ego here. What do I get out of it? And what do I get out of it? And if I can take something from you, great. If I can take something from you, great, super. Give me a little bit. And I'm also pulling the same way to me, and to me, and to me. That's how we exist, and we stop feeling the Creator. That relationship was broken. No more Creator, corporeal. Oh my God! I'm drawing, and you guys are not seeing anything. Okay, it's very dramatic. I hope you can imagine all the things I said with the drawings. So all those things. This is the web of connections that I mentioned. The Creator that was revealed in those connections, and then when those connections broke, when they stopped being important to us, all I cared about was what am I getting out of it? What do I get from you and from you and from you? This is the corporeal thing. There's barely an intention left. That's what it is. So we live in, we fall into corporeal actions without an intention, without correcting our desires. And there's another point here which is about faith above reason, but I'm not even going to get into that because it's a whole other lesson. But that's the situation. So this brings us to kind of the crux of the matter. This brings us to the difference between religion and spirituality. That was the birthplace of monotheistic religions. That moment in time, that instance of a nation falling from the relationship, a direct relationship with the Creator, knowledge of the Creator, into what we associate typically with religion. Blind faith, right? Because someone said so you have to do it, you have to believe it, that this is it. Can I feel it? No. Can I discover it? No. Below reason. I'm not even supposed to question things, let alone work with my doubts. Rather, I have to work below my doubts. Don't think about it. Don't ask questions. You should believe that the world is great, but I don't feel it's great. Oh, but I'm telling you to believe that it's great. Creator, wants you to do this and this and that, but why? What for? Doesn't matter. You work below reason. You don't question those things. You don't work against them, above them. You work with corporeal actions. All religions value corporeal actions. Rewards in this world, right? If I do this and this and this, maybe I get some, maybe I get a new job. Rewards in the next world. I do this and this and this here. I go to heaven, somewhere else. All those ideas came to us from this shattering, when people stopped feeling the presence of the Creator between them. So they had no other choice but to go to those places and to look for people who would offer these solutions. That was the climate of the time. Intention is not important. God will change if you ask Him. You pray to God and He will change because He's not perfect. There must be something that He could do better. So I'll just ask, I'll just remind Him, and He will change, right? And especially in Jewish tradition, but I'm sure elsewhere, do all those commandments, and eventually you'll reach love. And there's other things here. We won't have time to get into them. Pshat Remez Drash Sod. I'm not going to have time to. Maybe in the Q&A later. Whereas in spirituality is a whole different ballgame. There's no rewards in the will to receive. Why? Because the will to receive is a vessel that's broken. It's an egoistic vessel. You have to correct it. You receive something in a totally new vessel, which you don't have yet. So you have to first build a vessel, work to build a vessel, a corrected vessel, and then you receive something in it. What? The revelation of the Creator. You work with intention. That's the screen that goes on top of that vessel that corrects it. Few, if any, corporeal habits relate to spirituality. Why? Because spirituality has nothing to do with this world. This world is simply the starting point, the place where it's the lowest place from which you start, but it's the place in which you do the work. You don't have to go anywhere. There's no heaven. It's all here. If you die here, you have to come back here and do the work here. You have to do everything here. God will change me if I find out what needs to be changed about me in the relationship to others, in my connection to others, in my egoistic desire towards others. This He will do. I'm part of a system. It's not about me. It's about how I relate to the rest of the system. It's about connection. The world is perfect, but I'm broken. I'm not asking for the Creator to change the world because He probably didn't notice that there's war in this part of the world and famine in this part of the world, and I have to pray to remind Him. No, I'm the one who's broken. I'm seeing a broken reality. I have to change my intention, my desire. We have to start with love, and everything goes there, from there. That's the difference. So when we ask, was this guy a Kabbalist? Was this guy a Kabbalist? What does it mean to be a Kabbalist? To be a Kabbalist means that you have a Rav, a teacher. Every one of these people that I mentioned, these figures, which represent a spiritual state, but they also represented people, from our perspective, according to our corporeal perception of space and time, they were people who lived at those times and taught and collected their teachings in a book, which was the same wisdom, just refined and presented closer to that generation's will to receive. So you need a teacher. You need a guide, someone who's been there, who can point you in the right direction. You need books. You need source material. You need the group. All these things we talk about when we go into young group. Why you need those three things? Why not just a teacher, or just books, or just a group, or maybe just a teacher and a group? Maybe that's enough. Without all three elements, you're always risking deviating, falling off the path. Very easy to make the teacher some holy figure if you don't have the books and the group to ground you. Very easy to become a closed-off group and just reinforce negative habits and attitudes if you don't have a teacher that's telling you what to do. Very easy to misinterpret books if you don't have a teacher and a group, and so on and so forth. Kabbalist works with intention. The actions are a way for him to check his intention. They're a means, they're not the end result. Kabbalist works against his will to receive. A Kabbalist works to change here and now. There's no hereafter, there's no next world, there's no heaven, there's nothing. If we change it, reality changes before your eyes. You see it right here, right now. It's like changing a channel on TV, except you don't have the TV and you don't have the way to change the channel. So that's what you're building here. You're building the TV, or rather the glasses, and the way to change the channel. It's working with faith above reason, as I mentioned. And Mashiach is not a person or a personality, it's a force. From the word limshoch, to pull, that pulls you up. That's what makes a Kabbalist a Kabbalist. There are probably other traits, but these are the fundamentals when we're talking about those things. So, Jesus, you're all here, you all sat here patiently to listen to come to this question about Jesus. So, this figure, he was Jewish, likely. He likely studied Kabbalah, had knowledge of it. The whole nation of the Jewish nation lived in that state, or varying, deteriorating degrees of that state. We can't really speak of the history or the existence of this person. There are records about it, but we are not looking at things from a historic perspective. All the records of that time are very questionable. So yes, there was a person. Did he exactly undergo all those things? Not sure, but it's not the point. It doesn't matter, because those people who follow Jesus, they follow that ideal, right? What he represents. His story, as I said, represents this ideal of love, of compassion, of connection to the Creator. That speaks to billions, there's no questions about it. But he did not leave a written spiritual method for revealing the Creator. And there was no teacher-student lineage after he was gone. And lastly, what's left, not just from Jesus, but all the organizations that came after the destruction of the Second Temple, is organized religion as we know it. Lots of confusion, misunderstanding, internal fighting, lots of important values that were brought to humanity, but that are not really serving humanity today to bring it into spirituality. They're all important milestones in our development. And they also left humanity with a messianic myth, which is within the will to receive. Somehow there's a person, you'll stick to this guy or that guy, you'll do this and this and that, and you get rewarded. All those things are simply confusing, and a lot of corporeal customs. So this is not an indictment of Jesus or anything like that. This is the things that we know. And the final answer to the question is that Jesus is absent from our sources. That's really the easiest. There are other answers, and there are other things that we can talk of in that context. But mostly, when you look at how every teacher and a book, and they left a certain, they added another aspect to the development of the wisdom, as it served the growing will to receive. This represents one line, and this is the line that we as Kabbalists follow in Bnei Baruch. This is it, and that's the line we stick to. These are the source books we follow. These are the teachers we follow, and Jesus is simply absent from our sources. So that's the sort of the easiest. Maybe it's not the most exciting answer some of you expected, but that is the answer, because that's what we're working with in order to reach spirituality. So the final thought, and before we'll have a few minutes for some questions, is about just in general. People were asking, well, I was raised religious, Christian, Catholic, this, that, the other. What do I do with it? Baal Salam writes about it in the writings of the last generation. He says, the religious form of all nations should first obligate its members to bestow upon each other, to the extent that the life of one's friend will come before one's own life. Very simple. As in, love your friend as yourself. This is the law. One will not take pleasure in society more than a straggling friend. If someone is still behind, we have to make sure that they're not behind. This will be the collective religion of all the nations. However, besides this, each nation may follow its own religion and tradition, and one must not interfere in the other. So, no conflict if you want to reach spirituality. This is a path, it's laid out. Everything else according to your desire. This is it. Friends, let's take some questions. We have a few minutes left. All right, so I'm already telling you in advance, a lot of questions. Anything has to do with, hold on. Anything has to do with like actual history and all that, I'm not going to answer because I'm not a history teacher. You should ask someone who specializes in it, and he may have that answer to you. So, what about the Greeks and Jesus? What about the Greeks and Jesus? I'm not sure. Dan is asking, after the end of creation, will the line then be horizontal? I assume you're talking about that, the little graph. There's not going to be a line anymore, because all those things are simply changing states in the will to receive. And once it's reached, it's actually more like reaching infinity. The Creator is infinite goodness, and we need to have an infinitely big vessel. And if you think about it, it's a challenge, because a vessel, a desire, is a lack, and a lack is a painful thing. So an infinite lack is infinite pain. But there is a way out of that. and we're going to leave it for a different session. Ask me about it. Ask about a session on that, and we'll make it. We're not looking into eternal pain. On the contrary, it's eternal love. Francis, hi Francis. This is a big topic that needs a live presentation so there can be active discussion from crucial questions. What happens to the New Testament in Kabbalah? Nothing happens. Like I said, remember that line? Here, I'll show it again, just so everybody's clear on that. It's not there. Does it exist as a book? Yes, there are a million other books. The Quran and this and that, and some amazing books that were written, by the way, just last year that I really think would blow people's minds. Should you read them? If you want, but it has nothing to do with our spiritual development. That's what we're after. Alaruni, does one really work against the will to receive, or do you sort it out to work with it? Which part is holy, which part is not? Great question. This is one of the things we do in the young group. You actually learn how to work with the will to receive. You have to work with it, meaning that's all you've got. That's the matter of creation. That's who you are. You're a desire to receive pleasure. You can work with it. You can organize it, aim it, like dough, we say. We work with it like dough. Okay, there's a story about that. But yes, you work with it in the group because you need help from others. You can't work against it by yourself. There's simply no way. Steve, Yeshua did the work to incarnate the Kabbalah. Can we do the same? This I am not certain. Only for the reason that had he been part of that line, there would have been more appearances of his name in the text. If you start to study Kabbalah, you'll see that every article that Rabash and Baal Sulam write, and the Kabbalists before them, they all reference back the Bible and all the sages that existed before them. That's how it works. It's like the entire wisdom is built like layers upon layers upon layers, and you always reference the layers below and below and below. And so you stand to reason that if Jesus was indeed a Kabbalist of this line, the middle line, the work that we're doing here, he would have been mentioned probably in the text. He's not mentioned. That's why I say he's absent. It's not a judgment on him or not. Like I said, the story of Jesus touched billions of people. This is huge. People who want to dismiss religion are ignorant. It's huge. Christianity, Islam, billions of people have been touched by it. It's phenomenal. They were brought slightly more closer together than animals, okay? Religion did that, and then more. But now it's time that we move even beyond that into actual attainment. Everyone can attain those things. So there's not a judgment on those figures and their teachings. It's about, what do I do today so I can be a step closer to spirituality tomorrow? Francis, again, that picture, Leo, to begin with, is not the Jesus I believe in. What does the name mean in Greek and also in the Hebrew equivalent? So, like I said, Francis, your beliefs, as Baal Sulam I just read the quote, you can believe in whatever you want. There's no coercion there, no problem. You can have beliefs, traditions, customs, little things that you do that help you through the day. It's all good. The question is, again, is it part of the teachings? Is it part of the spiritual path that we're on? It's not. I know it's a little hard to kind of grasp because we want them more. We're humans. We like closure, right? Is he in or is he out? And this is more like he's absent. You I didn't promise a comfortable answer. I promised an answer. You have to make sense of it yourself. Right? We're all adults here. You want to have a certain picture of Jesus. You want to walk around with a cross because it reminds you of certain things. Please go ahead. No problem. It's just not part of the writings and of the method. Was Jesus a Kabbalist is a badly formed question. The real question is, do Buddha, Jesus, Kabbalah, Neoplatonism, Sufism emerge from the same source of wisdom? Yes. Everything comes from the same source. You can call it Kabbalah, you can call it the attempt of man to reconnect with the Creator. So everything comes from the same place. If you dig through our archives long enough, you'll find Rav speaking of his meeting meetings that he had with Sufis and Buddhists and Catholics and Christians, there's not a problem there. In fact, we really hope that there are other methods out there for people to attain spirituality, and that people will do it. There are many, there's a saying in Hebrew, there are many paths to the place, right? So a person studies where his heart desires. If your heart wants to study in a way that involves certain traditions, certain words and names and figures and pictures and things, it's up to you. Does it get you closer to spirituality? That's the only question. So there's no doubt that all these traditions, all these belief systems, there are over 3,800 of them, they're rooted in some grain of truth, because you cannot not come out of the one truth. But along the way, our will to receive is very tricky. That's the meaning and importance of having a lineage, having who's your teacher and who's your teacher's teacher and your teacher's teacher. Where along the line did something get lost in translation? Right? That's a question everyone should ask himself. Where am I getting this information from? Is it from Google? Is it one degree beyond? Is it a book? Who wrote that book and this book and the book before that? And who told him about that? And where did it? That's one of the things that Kabbalah has, is that line. That's the thing that I liked about it. Not only does it touches the heart and the mind, and it has the scientific aspect and the practical aspect and an internal work and also relationship to the world outside, but there was a clear line. You didn't have to second guess. Well, will I get somewhere or not get somewhere? You can actually follow these people, and you can connect the dots. So that's what we say. May we find more ways for people to reach spiritual attainment. Alruni, you mentioned that he created the desire to receive. Did he, or was it a result of the desire to give? The desire to give, the creator, we don't speak of the creator himself. This is called atzmuto in Kabbalah. It's equivalent to essence. Rather, we say the creator, which is the first quality that we can relate to, meaning something that created us, okay? And what he created was a desire to receive. If I'm a desire to give, I need something that can receive it. That's the only act of creation, a point that is empty of his presence. And that point grew and developed, and we learn about it in the 4 phases of direct light. Troy, what is the book called that Adam wrote? Adam wrote a book called Raziel HaMalach. Raziel, the angel. Angel in Kabbalah means a force of nature, right? Like I can write a book, The Angel Gravity. Okay, it's a force. Angel is a force because it doesn't have free choice. It cannot develop beyond where it's at. An angel cannot become like the creator. Man can. Still vegetative, animate, speaking, man. Everyone is moving towards equivalence of form with the creator. Not so angels. They're stuck, you can say. So that's the book he wrote. It's basically his encounter with that force of nature. Jean Paul, why does Rabbi Akiva acclaim Bar Kochba as a messiah? It's a whole story. I won't have time to get into it. If you read into it, you'll see that some say Kochba is also pronounced Koziva, which means false. Again, very, very turmoil times. A lot of people trying to do the best they can with what they have and the attainment that they have, and it doesn't always work out. We're still talking about humans here, right? Isam, I know it's out of scope of this video, but in the Quran there is a verse that says we have been made out of one nefesh. Is that evidence of Adam Kadmon theory? Maybe, like I said, maybe we'll do one about the Quran. There are a lot of things that came out of it. Keep in mind that the Quran was built on Christianity and on Judaism. Jesus appears, his name appears in the Quran, where he's referred to as just one of the prophets. So again, there's a lot of interconnections there. There's no question that these 3 religions, Jewish, Christian, and Christianity and Islam, they're all related to our development, the development of the will to receive. What I want to leave you with is this question again: what am I doing today that will bring me closer to spirituality tomorrow? This is the question that I have to ask myself, and everything else I should eventually put aside and move into a path that will lead me to the Creator. That's all the time we have. We'll see those of you who are G members on the Zoom for more questions and other great stuff. And all the rest, I'll see you in 4 or 5 weeks. And next week, I think Asaf will be here. Joseph will be here. Someone great is going to be here for sure. This is Kabbalah Explained Simply. Please go to KabU Connect and join KabU. Don't wait, and join the grad environment. This is where all these answers get clarified through actual practice. This is the real deal. It's been great, and until next time.